everyone. Welcome to the March Essential Vegan Desserts Live event at Rouxbe. I'm Fran Costigan, the Director of Vegan Pastry at Rouxbe, and I'm just delighted to be here today. I'm in Philadelphia. I'd love to know where some of you are from. I see one of my neighbors here, and I see a few people I know, so I know where you're from. But it's a very gray day in Philadelphia. We've had rain all day and the temperature got very cold again. But I hear that the temperature is, or the weather, the temperature is meant to go to the 70s in the next couple of days. So I call this, whatever sweater or jacket I wear, wrong. It's wrong. And I'm thinking about that in terms of the desserts I make. I'm already thinking about more spring produce, but I'm a little early with that. So this topic is interesting to me. Can this dessert be saved? Because I don't like waste. And sometimes we have to know when to stop adding things or fixing things. In other words, they say throwing good money after bad, or I think, wasn't it Kenny Rogers who had that song? You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. So we're going to discuss that today. If you have questions, just put them on the right side of your dashboard, your screen. There is a place to add questions if you like. And I do want to especially welcome guests, Rouxbe graduates, people who are in process in Rouxbe, and certainly my Essential Vegan Desserts students. Your work's been exceptional this month, and I want to thank you for that and remind the Essential Vegan Desserts students that if you have any problems of a technical nature, write to support@rouxbe.com, and someone from our correct team, our great team, will get back to you. If anybody here would like to reach me personally by email, you can do that at fran@rouxbe.com. So I'm going to ask Patrick to show a photo now, and it is a photo of a banana bread that I made, and I will say that I have an absolutely perfected banana bread recipe. And what I mean by that is it tastes good and the recipe is reliable. It works every time and has for many years. It's actually a recipe from my first cookbook, More Great Good Desserts Naturally, which I refer to as my pink book. But I just one day recently, I was in a tinkering mood, and I try not to go there very often with recipes that I know are tried and true. You have to know when to stop. I don't want something to work just once. I want it to work every single time. But I tinkered with this recipe and it was good, but not great. And I never want to make something or present something, offer a dish to anyone, myself included, that isn't great, particularly desserts, vegan desserts. So I was thinking it certainly wasn't awful. If the result was awful, well, then I would have had to toss it. But it wasn't awful at all. And I thought about what could I do? So there is a restaurant in New York City that I really enjoy. It's called Superiority Burger. The chef is actually a Michelin star chef, and he has a lot of vegan food. And he labels many of his desserts as griddled. And I think that word sounds wonderful when applied to a slice of to me, that means a muffin split in half, or all quick breads. Instead of saying toasted, saying griddled to me really adds some pizzazz. So when I made this recipe, because it was for banana bread, I baked it in a loaf pan, and I kept enough batter to make one muffin. and I added some chocolate chips to that muffin, to that one muffin. So what I'm really trying to explain is it wasn't that this wasn't good. It just needed something. I thought that the consistency, the texture of this particular dessert was just short of what I would call gummy, certainly not dry. So I decided to toast or griddle it. If I was serving this or writing a recipe, I'd say griddled banana bread. And then I added some of my favorite jam, which varies depending on my mood and the season, but it was orange marmalade and it was absolutely wonderful. So if you have baked any sort of quick bread, and that would be muffins, banana bread, zucchini bread, all of our quick breads. And I would even extend that to biscuits. I would suggest that if the flavor isn't absolutely off and you haven't left out something really important, so the result didn't bake at all, that you could split them and toast them and serve it that way with some jam or a cream and repurpose in that way. Of course, what I should say first is follow the recipes, choose a recipe that works. All of the recipes in Essential Vegan Desserts in all of our Rouxbe courses, in fact, have been triple tested. They work. In terms of, let's say you have a cupcake or a cake that is just not quite fabulous. Unless the flavor is really awful, and I will explain, I have actually an example to show you something where the flavor was kind of awful, and I tried to fix it, and I'm quite sure that I know what happened. There are a couple of things that you can do. With a cupcake, you can get it very cold or frozen, hollow out the center, insert into that hole, into where you hollowed, a small chocolate truffle, and warm this in the oven. And you know what you're going to get is a molten chocolate cake, which could really help with the flavor. And I find I was testing a Mardi Gras cake last month. Yeah, last month. And that's more of a bread. If anybody knows the king cake, it's more of a bread dough. I thought of it as a big cinnamon bun, for example. But I really love almond filling and almond frangipan, and I think vegan marzipan is so easy to make. So I wanted to fill my king cake with that. And I made several. Of course, I cut the recipes in half because that's what I do when I'm testing a recipe. And one in particular tasted very nice, but it didn't look nice. I can't remember what I did. And I stuck it in my freezer. And then my family came, my daughter and her husband and my two grandsons came, and I suggested to them that they take this cake home and moisten it slightly, wrap it in parchment paper and then in aluminum foil, and let it get warm in the oven and see if that would warm up the filling and warm up the frosting that I had made. And my daughter got back to me today and she said, "We did that and it tasted good. And then we just left the rest of it. It was a big cake. We left the rest at room temperature," she said, "and it was really good." So we don't have to do that. But sometimes if you bake with that particular cake, but sometimes if you bake something and it's just this side of a little too dry or overdone when it comes out of the oven, what I do is I warm up some maple syrup and water or maple syrup and orange juice and just lightly brush while the muffin or the cake is still warm with the maple wash. That's what I call it. And it's quite wonderful. That really helps. Another thing that you can do is, I think citrus juice, lemon juice, lime juice, orange juice, and zest brighten every flavor. I just love it. I know that citrus elevates. And so if something is tasting just a little bit flat, you can go ahead and try some citrus zest. Of course, with the juice, you want to be cautious about how much you're adding because it is liquid and it can curdle some of your creams. But honestly, I think that just really is the bomb. If you've made a pudding, let's say chocolate pudding or the vanilla pastry cream in the course, and it doesn't seem thick enough, that probably, and I'm assuming that you have followed the recipe clearly, carefully, read the recipe all the way through, did your mise en place, you've added everything correctly. It probably just needs to be cooked longer. One of my former students from my New York life, and so this is going back quite a while, texted me yesterday and said that she was making a recipe from my cookbook, Vegan Chocolate, and that I think it was called thick and fudgy chocolate sauce. And she said it didn't thicken. So I kept reading because I know that recipe works. And I know that she is a very good dessert person. She makes desserts beautifully. So I wondered about it and I kept reading. And she said the recipe says to cook this, to simmer it or even boil it low in a skillet. She said, I didn't have one large enough, so I used a saucepan. Well, when you are reducing something or letting the liquid cook off, the larger your pan, the quicker the liquid's going to evaporate. And so I said to her, try cooking it longer. And if that doesn't work, add a little more cocoa powder, temper it in, or a little bit of melted chocolate. It's really easy with chocolate, and see if that works. And she wrote back and she said it just had to be cooked longer. And so that's often the case when you're making something with agar, like the pastry cream in our course, really has to be allowed enough time to boil. And so those are some suggestions for you. Now I want to show you my mistake. So this looks like a graham cracker crust, or that's what it should look like. We have a wonderful graham cracker recipe in Essential Vegan Desserts, and there's nothing to do to make it better. But I wanted to see what I could do to make a gluten-free version. I didn't see any gluten-free and nut-free graham crackers in the market. So I said, okay, let me give it a try. And I thought about the different possibilities. You know, I use Bob's Red Mill gluten-free 1-to-1 baking flour, but I thought, no, I'm going to use oat flour. So I toasted the oat flour, and the graham crackers looked really beautiful when they were baking. They were nice and crisp. Everything was fine. And I tasted them and I was like, ick, this is really bad. They tasted salty, but in a medicinal way. And when I taste salty with a kind of a medicinal metallic flavor, that means too much leavening was used, too much baking soda, baking powder. So that was it. And that would have been a reason for me to dump them. But it wasn't awful. So I thought, let me see what I can do. Let me see if using some spices that are aggressive, meaning for me, that would be royal cinnamon from Burlap and Barrel, or ginger powder, some extra cinnamon sugar, and turning these graham crackers into crumbs to make a graham cracker crust, which is what I just showed you. see if that will help. And I have enough vegan butter in my house where I didn't mind using. I think I used a half a stick. I used 4 ounces. So it made a very nice crust. I tasted it. It still didn't taste great, but it was better. I baked it. I let it chill. And here it is. I'm not going to make this recipe again. It definitely smells like graham crackers at this point. I used a lot of cinnamon and a lot of ginger. And that's something you have to be careful about, because too much of those warm spices can take something from being delicious to being not good at all. I also did something else with some of the crumbs. I'm going to try to show you without spilling this, but I had some crumb left, and I added to this ginger and date syrup. And what I got, and then I toasted it, and I got this really kind of chewy crumb. So I did not have to waste that at all. But I learned that I have to be more careful about my measuring, or well, no, I measured correctly. I have to cut back in this particular recipe, cut back on the leavening quite a lot. So those are things that you can do that are pretty easy to do, actually, when you are trying to save something. And beyond a point, it is really fine to say that didn't work and I just have to get rid of it. It's not going to make a nice crumble. I can't save this cake to make crumbs for a crumb crust or to put on top of a pudding or something. It's just not good. To try to avoid that, if you're testing a recipe, cut it in half or even scale it by a quarter, and pay attention to the basics, like read the recipe all the way through, use the correct ingredients, don't start messing around, and make sure that your oven is preheated, and so on. So I see there aren't too many questions here, but I'm going to answer them. Well, my favorite people in the world, and anybody here from Rouxbe or Philadelphia knows Chef Shar Nolan. Chef Shar is one of the favorite chef instructors at Rouxbe, and she is an expert. She is our expert in whole food, plant-based, no oil. So Chef Shar has a very interesting question, and she's asking, what are the uses for whipped maple syrup? Can it be used to ice a cake? So anyone here who hasn't seen whipped maple syrup, it's thick. It doesn't look like maple syrup anymore. It looks almost like maple butter, but it isn't maple butter. Maple butter is whipped maple syrup, which means boiled maple syrup with butter added to it. And we could certainly do that in a vegan way. In order to make maple syrup that's kind of whipped maple syrup, get it thick, that can take 30 minutes of boiling and a lot of stirring. And it can be done. I have done it myself. You can also buy it. Chef Shar, I'm not sure if it can be used to ice a cake. I haven't used this in a long time, but if it's thick enough, you should be able to get it onto your cake. Would you let me know? I would love to know. And the maple syrup that I use is always grade A dark, which used to be grade B, but I think that people seem to think that B was inferior. Use the dark, you get a better flavor. And here's Demetra, another of our favorite Rouxbe instructors. Hi, Demetra. So Demetra is asking, please share your tips on a fail-safe vegan meringue to top my favorite citrus pie. I would be delighted to, Demetra. I have a freezer full of aquafaba, and that is my favorite base to make vegan meringue. So if there is anyone here who doesn't know what aquafaba is, This refers to the aquafaba, means bean water, actually. And it is the liquid that beans have been cooked in, and aquafaba meringue is generally made from the liquid from garbanzo beans or cecchi or chickpeas, depending on where you are from. We don't salt the liquid. So if you're using the aquafaba, the bean liquid from a can of chickpeas, buy unsalted chickpeas. And if you're making it from scratch, which is what I do, add a piece of kombu seaweed to the water that you will be cooking your beans in. I use my Instant Pot, and once the beans are soft enough, I take the piece of kombu out, save it. I might use it again, drain the beans, put the liquid back into the Instant Pot, and use the the soup setting until it is reduced by at least half. With the can, most cans yield about between 2/3 and 3/4 of a cup. So we want to standardize it, and we want to make this aquafaba really sturdy. We want to make sure, again, that it's going to whip every single time. So I reduce the canned to a half cup, then chill it. And because I eat a lot of chickpeas, I have a lot of aquafaba in my freezer. I simply defrost it and use it. So you're going to start with your cold reduced chickpea liquid, add a small amount of cream of tartar, which is the same thing you would do if you're making meringue from egg whites. That is an acid. And I think that we use a 1/4 teaspoon for a half a cup of aquafaba, and then beat that until it is opaque and a little further. And once you've got soft peaks, I start adding sugar, and I use castor sugar. By that, I mean that I grind vegan organic sugar until it's fine in my Vitamix and store it. I've got a bunch behind me, a tablespoon at a time, and beat after every addition. And then when all of the sugar is in, keep beating it. And it sounds like a long time, and it can be a long time, but you can walk away from it. Unlike egg white meringue, you really can't beat aquafaba meringue. I shouldn't say that. There really are no absolutes, but I have really, and by beat, I mean with the whisk attachment on my mixer, I find that it can be whipped for a very long time until you get really stiff peaks. You can put the bowl upside down over your head in the same way, and it you can toast it. You can use a torch, Demetra, in the same way that you would with egg white meringue. And I have some students. This is actually Baked Alaska is a very popular assignment in this course, a graded assignment. I've had a couple of students over the years who didn't have a kitchen torch and have toasted their aquafaba meringue under the broiler. Just be careful. So I hope that answered your question, Chef Demetra, and let me know what you're going to be making with it. It's great. You can also make cookies, meringue cookies. And then I take leftover meringue cookies or shards, and I do something called Eton mess, which is a real dish that came from evidently boarding school, Eton in the UK, which is meringue and pudding or lemon curd or chocolate pudding or whatever. Hi, Kathy. So I've got Kathy C here. Can you share your experience and thoughts on cake decorating sites that are using various flavored ganache for icing instead of buttercream? Kathy, I don't have any particular online sites to talk about, but you can certainly use a stiff ganache for icing a cake, the students in Essential Vegan Desserts learn all about ganache. And so if there's anybody here, well, I'm going to review it for all of you. Ganache is an emulsion between a percentage of chocolate and a percentage of heavy cream. This is typical. Sometimes flavorings are added, sometimes butter is added. We make it with a percentage of chocolate, vegan chocolate, which means non-milk chocolate. But you want to read the label because some dark chocolates lately have milk powder added. So we're assuming a quality vegan chocolate, not chocolate chips, which are considered heat-proof chocolates. They're made not to melt. I did a thing on my blog, if anybody here is interested, about why we're not using chocolate chips. So quality chocolate, and then I want to use a rich dairy-free milk. Many recipes call for using coconut milk because coconut milk has a lot of fat and it's kind of the equivalent of a light cream. I use a full fat oat milk, Oatly, most of the time. You can add some fat to your plant milk if you want. And if you do it in a proportion that's going to give you not a pouring ganache, but a more like a truffle ganache, that can be absolutely can be whipped and can be piped. And in terms of flavored ganache, the way that you do that is you infuse the milk that you're heating, because you've got to heat milk or cream hot enough so that the chocolate will melt. Infuse that with any spices that you like, and then strain it and use that milk. So let me know how that goes for you, Kathy. Hi, Regina. So Regina says, why do you add seaweed to chickpea liquid? I purchase canned chickpeas with the seaweed, and it's quite hard to separate it from the liquid. Well, kombu, which is a seaweed, is said to give strength to the aquafaba. And this is something that not only vegan sites and vegan authors, recipe developers are saying, but also I saw this, I think, in America's Test Kitchen. I don't know what brand that you bought. I've never seen canned chickpeas with seaweed in it. So my stick of kombu stays as a stick. You know, it softens, but it doesn't shred out. So I don't know about that. Regina, I think what you can do is rinse the chickpeas to get the seaweed off and use a very fine mesh strainer to try to catch the bits of seaweed from the liquid. Hi, Carol. Carol says, I'm sorry, but I missed how much sugar to add. That you didn't miss it. I didn't tell you. I didn't give you the recipe. You may find it on my website though, francostigan.com. Kathy is asking a follow-up question here to the ganache. How would you make a strawberry whipped ganache? I would puree. Now I'm making this up. I haven't done it. I would puree a lot of strawberries, probably frozen strawberries, because they have oftentimes, except in the height of summer, if you're lucky enough to live someplace where the strawberries are absolutely delicious, they'll have more flavor. I would defrost them. I would puree them. I would sieve them. And I would use that as a liquid, or primarily as the liquid, to use with the chocolate and see how that goes. In terms of caramel, that's a big question. And so I can't answer that here. Kathy, you'll have to do some recipe testing. That's very interesting. I'm very interested in the can of chickpeas that has the kombu seaweed in it. The only one that I can think of is Eden brand. And I know that the ingredients say what you want is chickpeas and water, and that's it. Eden has chickpeas, water, and kombu, but I've never seen I have never seen the seaweed in it. So that's what I have, that's all I know. If those are all the questions that we have, and I have nothing else to say, so I'm going to thank you again for being here with me this afternoon. I hope everyone is going to enjoy the rest of the day or evening, depending on where you are. And I hope to see you next month when I do another live event. Thank you very much for being here. Bye.